Welcome to Explainable AI, where demystifying digital minds is your personal journey into the heart of artificial intelligence. I'm Paul Anthony Claxton, an AI venture capitalist and serial entrepreneur. After a decade of service in the U.S. Marines, I was captivated by the power of battlefield technologies, where I was actually inspired to dive deeper into the world of enterprise technology. My commitment is to make a meaningful difference and contribution, which led me into the world of venture capital. I view capital as a powerful tool to drive positive change. As a recognized thought leader in AI and venture capital, I do regularly share my thoughts and my insights through podcasts such as this and blogging and articles on major platforms such as IdeaScale, New York Weekly, AI Accelerator Institute, and so on. You can actually learn more about me by going to my personal CV site, paulclaxton.io. And now I'd like to bring our co-host into the conversation as well and introduce himself.
Thanks, Paul. My name is Rohan Hall. I'm the author of the book called Tech for Good. Tech for Good focus on what are the top 10 technologies that are impacting our world today and how can we use them for good. This includes AI and blockchain, quantum computing, neuromorphic computing, edge computing, synthetic biology. There are a whole slew of these technologies that are emerging today that have already changed our lives, and it will continue to change our life in the future. I'm also CEO of Osisha Ventures. Osisha Ventures focus on building technologies with startup founders, and where the primary focus of our venture studio is we build technologies that were not possible to be built 5 years ago. And we're building technologies that can impact and change the world for the better. In the last week, we have released one such technology called Speak and Play. It's at speakandplay.ai. And what we're able to do with that technology is that we are able to help families where their children have some kind of communication challenge, and we're able to help them within 5 minutes, something that would take them months to be able to go to see a communication therapist. They can do it from in a browser, regardless of where they are in the world and in a language. So we believe that by leveraging AI and different technologies to help the world is a really worthy effort. And so that's what my focus is. That's what I spend all my time doing, is figuring out how to do this. And so I'd like to introduce our guest for today. Our guest is Zach Giglio. Zach, I'll let you correct me with that. Zach is quite an amazing guy, and he is really deep into technology. And what I like about Zach and his story is that we're all fumbling around and using technology. Zach simplifies it for businesses and help businesses. It could just be a normal business without tons of technologies. He breaks it down to people in a way that is actually consumable and usable for most businesses. But I'll let Zach introduce himself and start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, Zach.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the kind intro. I am the CEO of GCM. And like you say, we help organizations and businesses across the country implement off-the-shelf AI inside the work they're already doing to drive further impact, profitability, and efficiency. We primarily focus on foundational models because that's where people already are anyway. In fact, believe that they're powerful enough that most businesses would spend a decade figuring out how to get everything out of them. Certified by the Wharton School of Business and AI Strategy for Business. I'm on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Organization Management Curriculum Committee, on their AI task force, and I'm actually also on their faculty. We've won some awards, thankfully, and I do a good amount of speaking and workshops in addition to the more intensive trainings that we do and implementations with organizations. And it is clear that I'm the least intelligent person on this podcast at the moment, which, to your point, though, is maybe a benefit of me needing to understand this stuff on a practical level so I can help others who are also not that technologically savvy use it as well.
You're a funny guy. Okay. We'll continue. Paul, do you want to shoot the first question?
Hey, it's Rohan Hall. Hey, what if I were to tell you that there are thousands of potential clients that are looking for your specific expertise right now? The problem is they can't find you. It's not a problem with your expertise, it's a problem with your discoverability. And this is what we're working on right now at Osisha. If you'd like to learn more, just go to osisha.ai. That's OCESHA.ai to learn more. And feel free to join our early access program. We're going to be launching this in April of this year, 2026. Thank you. And now back to the program.
Yeah, absolutely. You've talked about AI implementation and companies spending billions on AI palettes that go nowhere. Why do you think so many AI projects fail, Zach?
So, to oversimplify the answer, it's because they're treated as a tech implementation first and foremost, as opposed to a change management program. And so, what we're used to dealing with are companies that don't really have a lot of technological capability or massive budgets to implement very sophisticated technology. We're used to dealing with the 99.9% of businesses in America that are small and medium-sized businesses. And so what happens typically is, and what we see like in the MIT report that kind of quantified those numbers for us about that failure rate and that big spend,
Mhm.
is that these companies are buying these often clunky proprietary models based on their own data, and then they're essentially just dropping them on their people's laps and saying, good luck, use this in your role, and we'll come back in 3 months and see how you're doing. And what they found was that people really struggled to use these models. These were new tech tools. They didn't really get the proper training. But also, what they found is that people were really confused about what was the purpose of all of this. Is this replacing me? Is this helping me? Is this helping the business? Am I just giving myself up and all of my knowledge and my ability to an AI model that is then going to replace me and make the business more profitable? And so there was like this massive lack of communication. And I think the final thing that they saw is that people, when they got frustrated with these proprietary models, ended up going back to off-the-shelf foundational models like ChatGPT anyway, because they were just more comfortable using it. And so I think the biggest challenge was that they weren't meeting their people where they weren't communicating what the vision of this implementation is, and they were getting those really poor results. And I think if you just think about it more as a change management program, which means considering the human being, as silly as that sounds, in this whole process, you will have a much higher success rate, because this is more what we find, particularly again in the companies we work with. This is more of a change of behavior. So it's not necessarily, do I know how to use these platforms or these tools? It's, am I able to rewire the way that my brain works? I've done my role for a decade, and in some instance, 3 decades. I've done my job a certain way. I know how to do my job. But now what's being asked of me is to, as I start getting into my role in my day to day, I'm asked to pause and to look in a different direction and to engage a different program, which is truly a rewiring of our brain. And I think when people put the effort into that rewiring process, into that change management process, they get much better outcomes.
Thank you for that. As you said that, it made me think about in the early 2000s and the beginning of the internet and all of these things that were going on. One of the really big things that came out of that period was really change management. There was a sequence of technologies that were called ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. Some of the big companies came out with that was Oracle, SAP, PeopleSoft. I had a consulting firm at the time. That's what we did, was really change management, but we were leveraging these standardized technologies. And the main value of that was integrating a global organization. It was much bigger. These were organizations that were all over the world, and where it would take them a month to get a report of what was going on in Asia. For example, this is a true story. And we were able to go in and implement. And a big part of it was, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And let's show you how you can do it easier with this technology. The change management that you're doing, it sounds a little bit like that. Are you including, what does that process look like? Do you include educating the people? There's clearly a lot of insecurities as well regarding, hey, I'm using this technology. Does it mean that it's going to take my job? So, what are some of the fears and challenges that you're seeing, and how do you get past that within your implementation?
Yeah, it's a good question. And obviously, it comes from someone with experience in this field. And basically, what we do is trying to more or less mimic what you've just explained, but scale it down to make it accessible to businesses that, again, don't have the massive resources. So, yeah, there is tremendous fear about AI. And so we go about it a couple ways. One, we try to politely communicate organizationally that AI isn't discerning in the sense that it's only hunting for people to replace that are already using it. There's no, oh, I'm just going to go find the person using it and replace those jobs. But if you don't use me, I'll never come for you. And so what we try to communicate politely is whether or not you decide to use AI has no bearing on whether or not AI can ultimately replace your job. So that's one. So you're not doing yourself any favors by not using it. In fact, it's the opposite. But what we try to do in the very beginning of this process, before we even engage the initial set of, let's call them AI champions, on a team, is to level set with the leader and to let them think through some of these challenges about the concerns and questions that these people typically will have during this process, like you just mentioned, Rohan. And also stress along the way that this is a way to make technology fit around you and magnify your abilities and help you maybe just become more efficient. And then we go through like a step-by-step process on the front end to really dive into each person's workflows and responsibilities. And I think that alone shows that we're trying to understand them and gear this to them, not to replace them. So I think that's also helpful as well. And the other thing is to design the pilot use cases in a way that is follows change management principles so that we're reducing friction and setting a foundation for longer term growth and success so that people feel like they can be a part of the success of the business when they're implementing and adopting AI, not that this is a business success that at their expense, that they actually are a part of it. And so we try to help them identify pilot use cases that are simple, meaningful, and part of the work that's already being done. And then fourthly, that gets them very excited to save time because they hate this part of their job and so on. And if we do those things, and also it's to be honest though, there's only so much we can do as I believe as outside consultants. It's really up to the leader in the organization to set the vision and to communicate this to their team. We try to empower them as much as possible to do that. But unfortunately, I've been in a room where that has happened effectively and that also has not happened effectively. And the environment in the room is very different.
Toxic, I'm sure. I'm sure. There's one more follow-up question. There was another period of time. So I've been building tech for a very long time. There's another period of time. This was probably, I don't know, maybe like a decade or so ago. And there's something called RPA, robotic process automation. And again, these are like enterprises kind of scale technologies. And what you would do at that point is again a similar thing, but in this case, it would be here are all the processes that someone is doing, let's automate that. And so there were certain corporate level automation technologies that were being used. Now, what I'm seeing is there are technologies like Zapier and other technologies that are more small business, one-off kind of things like that. Is that some of the things that you're doing? You're like saying, hey, here are a bunch of tasks that you've mentioned that people don't want to do anyway. Let's go ahead and build some automation scripts for that and just go ahead and execute that. The first part of the question is that what you're doing, but also isn't there a need for some education in that as well? I teach AI stuff as well, and there's a big gap between where people are coming from and where they need to be to like really understand the stuff. Is that a part of what you guys provide as well?
Yeah, I agree with you. And yes, it is. When we go in to do even like the more fundamental implementation of off-the-shelf AI, the first component is that education part. Because to your point, like people who are scared of AI or at least unsure how it fits into their role, a big way to get over that is just to let them understand it and help them understand what it is, also what it isn't. And by demystifying it and educating them on the best uses and practices and the limitations of these foundational models, where the risks are and how it matches up with their role, then we start getting the guards down and the walls down, and they're more open to using it in their role. So 100% the educational part is there. It's actually core to what we do. Speaking of Zapier and automation tools, we do get requests from companies to just come and automate stuff. We run this process. Can you please just set up our automated workflow so we don't have to do that? And we usually say no unless they allow us to come and educate their team first. Because first of all, I don't want to be in the business of tech support. But second of all, I truly believe that this is the most fundamental technology. Now, I don't understand quantum computing the way that you do, and I think that's like a whole nother thing that I can't even wrap my brain around. But as far as I understand, artificial intelligence is the most transformative technology of our lifetime for many reasons. One, leveling the playing field. Two, as a result of that, creating a more resilient and more diverse American economy and global economy as well, which is very exciting. And in order for that vision to be realized, we all have to understand and know how to use it. And those that don't are going to get left behind, and it's going to be a problem. So we believe very strongly in the educational component of this entire thing. And so we do that first and foremost. We educate people on this because we want to teach them how to fish, not give them a fish and have them call us every time they get hungry. So step one is that education. Then we do that off-the-shelf AI implementation. We design workflows and show them how to use AI inside of those workflows, going step by step. First, you do this, you upload this document, you run this prompt. This is how you construct that prompt. Then you do that. Once they feel comfortable, then we'll come back maybe 3 months later when they're like, all right, we've hit these efficiencies, we're getting bored now. Now we'll come in and we'll set up automated workflows. And as not every automated workflow actually has an AI component in it. But if and when we do bring AI components, we bring in like the OpenAI API and things like that. When we do bring in AI components, they're more knowledgeable about how that actually fits into the overall automated workflow. When they want to duplicate that workflow, they can make the necessary changes. When they need to troubleshoot that workflow, when their API runs out of credit, they understand all this stuff. So they can go in and this can start growing from within the organization. We can always stick around and help them, but it is extremely important in our minds that these people understand what is happening under the hood of AI and how it pertains to their work, particularly once we start getting to automation, which is, it's funny, you go in, and I'm sure you've experienced this, when people start understanding what this stuff really is, their light bulbs start going off and they get excited and they start feeling empowered. And then when they really see all the opportunity, it almost weighs them down because they don't know where to go and where to start. It's overwhelming. And so just helping them walk along that journey, I think, is important.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think we teach more executives and professionals, and I had a student just a few weeks ago. He is a movie director, and he's been an actor in some of the major movies in the past, and he wanted to figure out how to do some of these things and how to write a book and how to make movies and all these things. And so we put together a class, and as we were going through it was like his head was exploding.
Yeah,
like,
you can see it. It's
oh
visual.
yeah. It's like, oh my God, you can do this. And it's like, my God. And so it was really, I've always loved teaching. I've done a lot of teaching, professional and corporate education as well. But AI is really a special thing. And I'll put it over to Paul in a minute. But to answer one of your questions regarding the other technologies, right? And also because we have our audience is a wide range. Some of them are very technical, some of them are not. The big value of AI, it is one of the most transformative things, but the real big value of AI is that it adds a brain to all the other emerging technologies, right? And so that's what we'll see more and more. And for the tech folks that are listening, IoT before is now edge computing, meaning that IoT and the things was just were just sensors that's sending data back, but they couldn't make decisions, right? With AI, now you have what's called edge computing, which is the same thing, but with a brain, right? And so AI does that. Quantum computing, blockchain is great for some things, but now with AI, it has a brain, right? So think of AI as all of these other technologies. Robotics was really a cool thing, but it was really slow in what it does because it really couldn't think very well, right? Or it could take $1 million to do it. With AI on top of that, then you have robots with a brain, right? So think of the Wizard of Oz, right? Not only is AI transformative for the work that you're doing for businesses, right? But AI amplifies all the other emergent technologies that are emergent today. Synthetic biology, nanotechnology, all of these things benefit from AI. So that's why it's so transformative, is that it's not just because it helps with businesses, but it helps with literally every other thing that's going on right now. So I'll stop at that.
Yeah, not to go too far off on a tangent, but I really appreciate that insight. And I definitely don't have that much insight into it, but I was able to do a TEDx talk last year. And the idea was that I want everybody to use, the title was, and it was meant to hopefully provoke a little bit, but using AI as your civic duty. And the idea was that because AI will be layered onto absolutely everything we do in life, it is important that we all use it and understand it so that we can weigh in and help design how it goes, or at least try to
Yeah.
influence. Whether or not we're successful in that, I don't know. But at least as people, as a society, we can have all of us speak up knowledgeably about what we want from this technology, how we want it to be developed, how we don't want it to be developed, what we don't want it to be used for. We could talk to our elected officials, our regulators, and just from a more informed position, because this is going to be the control layer on absolutely everything. And I liken it back to social media, where we had no idea what the impacts were going to be on society. And we now see that they're massive, and only a few people at a few companies made decisions on how those algorithms were built and how we were served and communicated, or how we were served information and how we were not served other information based on who we were and what they thought we wanted, and how much has impacted society. And that is going to pale in comparison to what AI is going to do as a control layer on absolutely everything. That's also part of like our mission. You both talked about your missions in the beginning, which I think are really admirable and I connect to and really admire. That's part of ours. It's part of the work that we do. I think we're good at what we do. I like what we do. I like making money doing what we do, but I think it ties to that large mission of we all need to use this so we know it, so we can influence it if possible.
I agree.
Yeah. Great conversation, great dialogue. One of the areas of conversation that I wanted to focus on is we talked a lot about change management, Zach, and I just wanted to get your perspective. Like, what are you seeing from a cultural, organizational, and cultural adoption standpoint, from an organization adoption and then an organizational culture in terms of adopting and implementing AI? What are you seeing in terms of adoption rates? How fast different organizations and industries are picking up on this? And what are the reasons for that? I also worked in ERP systems. I was a ERP systems project manager dealing with large scale ERP system migrations, change management, stakeholders, et cetera. And there's always the kind of the focus on VUCA environments, right? And navigating that and seeing things as a threat versus a help, so to speak. In terms of organizations adopting this, I think there's the element of VUCA, or is this a threat, versus how will this also help our organization, and how do we quantify this to our stakeholders, to the bottom line? And with all of kind of those factors spoken now, what are you seeing in terms of organizations adopting this both culturally and from an organizational process standpoint?
Yeah, so I think in my experience, and again, we work with small and medium-sized businesses, and so it's usually around, maybe they're doing 50 million a year to 300 something million a year is usually like our sweet spot. So it's not very large businesses. And for a lot of them, they're not really thinking about this at all as far as change management program. They think about this as like buying a new piece of technology and giving it to their people. And so they're missing they have just a lot of blind spots in the rollout. And I think the other thing is they just don't also have a sense of what is really going on inside their organization as far as current AI adoption. So basically what happened, a typical thing, someone in the leadership goes to a conference. They see someone talk about AI. They get all pumped up. They go back to their team and they're like, we got to use AI. And then they leave the meeting room and they don't say anything else. And everybody's like, how, what, why? No one really knows. So everybody just brings their own AI to work. Some use ChatGPT, some use Copilot, some use Gemini, some use Claude. There's no like policy. They might have some broad thing about we can't put proprietary or confidential information into a cloud-based model, but then they don't have a definition of what proprietary or confidential information is at their organization anyway. So people don't, it's like, honestly, like it is so fragmented and underdeveloped that we really just start from square one. And the other challenge that we have is just getting like an honest assessment of what is going on inside the organization. A lot of this is like we're asking like, what are you doing on a daily basis? That's not always a comfortable thing to be reporting in front of everybody, because some people think that they won't understand it, or maybe it makes me look like I'm not doing that much, or I'm giving away my secrets, or whatever it is. And so we're getting people in these situations. And what we find is trying to have to cut through all that noise to figure out where the opportunities are. And the other challenge that we have is a few years ago, it used to be that people who were using AI were lying and saying that they weren't because they felt like it was some dirty little secret. Now people who aren't really using AI are lying and say that they are because they feel like it makes them look smart. So like we have to like
That's funny.
navigate that as well, and just try to like really not make the process, at least the initial process, at all about AI. Just make it about people, make it about their work, make it about where they're spending a lot of their time. In fact, I was just on a call today, and what I try to communicate is, because they'll be like, I'm doing this thing, but it's complicated. I don't think AI can do that. And I don't know how to politely say, who are you to say what AI can do and what AI can't do? So what I say is, Just think, instead of thinking, can AI do this? Think, can Zach do this? Zach is a reasonably intelligent person. He doesn't know anything about your job or your role, your industry, but if you give him good enough direction, I should be able to accomplish normal, simple tasks. So if you replace what you think AI can do with what you think a reasonably intelligent professional with some years of experience in as a professional, then you start getting a lot better ideas going. So yeah, that's where we are. I think when you're dealing with some of the larger companies like 300 that we deal with, like 300, 350, 500 million a year, then if I say the word change management, they know what I'm talking about. But if I'm going down to the 100 million a year, 200 million a year, they've never heard that term before in their life.
Do you find a certain category of business that's more attracted to your service, or is it just generically whatever business?
We ended up focusing a lot on construction. Now, I don't know if that's because that industry is more open to it. It's just happened to have been where a lot of our opportunities started coming from. And we end up doing a lot of work with major national construction associations, with construction companies. I get to tell a story about how my dad was a builder. He built houses on Long Island, New York, and I used to drive around in the Bronco with the car phone that was like literally bolted to the floor of the Bronco. And he'd be on site, and I'd roll down the window and yell that he had a call and who it was. And they had CB radios. And so I get to relate. I know I grew up a little bit around construction. So those people, I just feel comfortable with them. They're like,
Uh-huh.
oh, you got it. You're going to
Okay.
be in a room with our people, our project managers. And I used to
Mhm.
call those people uncle who weren't even related kind of thing. And it
Mhm.
just so happened that we just started like getting more and more attention from that industry. And so we started focusing our efforts and we started developing use cases and we speak the language and we do it. So we find that like construction, I don't know, for whatever reason, is just where we spent a lot of time. Now, I also do a good amount of like more high level workshops for associations or chambers where it's a mix of organizations. And it's a lot of industries where usually like teams are small. So like real estate agents are like some of the most far along I find in the in AI adoption because it's usually like very small teams of a one person show who's a part of a larger outfit who like has to do everything themselves, manage all their clients, do all their sales, write all their like property descriptions, that whole thing. So I find that like they're like a little bit more to it, but yeah, I don't know. It seems like construction, real estate. You know what industry? Just like racking through my brain. The one industry that I find very difficult to get through to is like healthcare, more like doctors' offices, and
Oh, really?
it's like so weird that we'll go in and they have all like these HIPAA things, but like they have tools and models out there that are like very compliant with all this stuff. But they just some people might listen who I know and they know who I'm talking about them. They get so wrapped around the axle of how precious their processes are that like nobody
Right.
could understand it. Not even AI couldn't
Yeah,
understand like their process. So I find that like they're very reluctant. Yeah, I don't know. So
that's
I just racked my
interesting.
brain there. It's a really good question. I should probably put some more thought into that.
Yeah. I would think when you say healthcare, I would think it would be more of a data pushback because data is so well protected and HIPAA compliant and stuff like that. But it doesn't sound like that's the pushback that they're giving, though. It's that they're protective of their process or lack of process. It could be. So that's quite interesting.
What
Yeah.
I also find, which I found surprising, somewhat related to your question, is the demographics who are more open to it. So it's
Okay.
weird, but I find like the younger, like the more junior people with like less experience are actually more opposed to AI, or at least feel like they have more to prove about why they're more intelligent or irreplaceable, as opposed to the more
Ah,
experienced people who I think feel more comfortable in who they are, what they can do, and what they can't do. They are like way more open and ready to adopt AI. And it happens like every time. Like typically the person when I'm on like the initial calls, like the person who is most opposed to this is like the young marketing person. They're like by far the most pushback. It is like palpable. They're like, hey, I can't do this and all of that. Where the more like senior project managers or people in operations, they're like, give me everything you have. I will take whatever you have. If I don't have to spend my time doing like mundane repetitive admin work, I'm all about it.
that's really insightful because I've had a couple of those conversations with young people and they were pushing back, and I was really surprised. I'm like, dude, this is your world. This is your world. But that's really insightful. I wonder if it's just because when we're older, we know the real pain of all the monotonous things that you have to do when they're young. They're still starry-eyed or as you said, maybe they have to prove that they don't need AI. But that's a really important point. Thanks for sharing that. That's really, yeah, yeah. I hadn't stopped to think about it, but not when you said it, I'm like, yeah, I've had a couple people like that that are really young and they're just like, no AI kind of thing. Like, yeah, and like I had that one young guy. I'm trying to remember how I was connected with him, and I ended up lecturing him, which I hate to do, but I do. I'm a dad, a teacher, a lecturer, right?
Yeah.
Can't help it. And I ended up lecturing him about why he really needed to learn this stuff and his entire future. And I felt really bad after that. I'm like, oh my God, I lectured this poor guy about this stuff and unsolicited lecture information. And I'm like, no, my kids are, feel sorry for them. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Paul, questions, follow up?
Yeah, I've always said, Zach, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I believe that the current state of AI is a lot like the Model 4. And so by that, think about all the revolutions and the improvements that have been made to the vehicle, to the consumer vehicle since the Model 4. We've got self-driving cars now, cars that diagnose themselves. So cars are a lot more efficient than they used to be. And I think with any major consumer shift or economic revolution, we always run into the cart before the horse scenario, right? Where we're bringing effectiveness to the table, but not necessarily efficiency, right? And then it is then where we start to establish problems. I think Paul Virilio says every time you invent something, you invent the disaster. For example, if the plane had not been invented, we would not have the plane crash. I think what we see is when we see major movements like this, where, technologies, what I would call a humanity technology. AI is it's not even an industry technology, it's a humanity technology. It changes the way that we do business and at a broad scale from macro all the way down to the most intricate levels. And so with that being said, I think we're very much in that kind of Model T Ford phase with AI. And we have to bring efficiency to the table. We've proven that AI is certainly effective, but we definitely need to make it more efficient. We need to stop making it hallucinate. We need to make it more explainable. We need to regulate how it's being used both by organizations and consumers so it's not dangerous and so on. In your mind, how do we, for the future of AI, and especially, say, for example, investors like myself or serial entrepreneurs like Rohan here who are building products that people are going to be using or organizations are going to be implementing, how do we make it more efficient? We've proven it's effective, but let's make it more efficient so that it doesn't pollute the environment, so that it doesn't proliferate is essentially sweat labor costs or sweatshop, like basically sweatshop factories that are out there mining this stuff, right? And so on. Like, how do you, in your mind, how do we help as leaders, how do we help organizations make it more efficient?
Yeah, it's a good question. I hadn't really thought about the Model 4. That's interesting, and I like that analogy. The way I think about it is I always go from like the small example and look broader as opposed from the broader example to look small. And when I look at efficiency inside of an organization, I always think one of the things I'll say is I've never worked with an organization or a business and reporting saving 30% of their time within the first week of an implementation, right? No one's going home 30% earlier. It isn't we're like going to have these ideas about 4-hour work weeks and playing more golf and spending more time with their family. I'm all for it. I just haven't seen it yet, and I'm very reluctant to think that's what's going to happen. And so I think to be efficient, when I think about efficient, it's making sure that we're tying the outcome to something measurable, to something that's actually impactful that we want to happen. So not just saving time for the sake of saving time, but saving time on this area so that we can focus more of our energy here. For me, I always think, and I'm sure it's very similar with what you all do, it's really most people that I talk to, the most valuable time that they get in their business and in their life is human engagement. It's talking to people, developing relationships, understanding them on deeper levels, and that informs stuff. And so if we're using AI to support that and to spend less time doing admin and more time with people, talking to people and problem solving together, I think that's a better way to go about it. Now, when it goes to the broader regulation, I do have like my own perspective on it. I will say that I'm not the most versed or knowledgeable about it, but I tend to think that we already have a framework for regulation on AI that exists in the world without AI. So most of the things that I think people want to regulate around AI already exist. There's already emission standards. I can't already harm people. I already can't do malicious like slander and deep fakes. Like there are regulations as far as the PTO and patent and trademarks. There are already regulations that exist in society that I think people overcomplicate when they look at how do we regulate AI. AI just makes some of these things, unfortunately, more possible by more people that are negative, some of the negative implications. So I think the regulation environment is almost already exists. Now, as far as the things that you talked about with like pollution and things like that, and I'm probably alluding to the energy infrastructure that we need and the energy suck that these like data centers require to power these models. What I'm encouraged about, and Rohan brought up about edge computing, what I'm encouraged about is some of the innovations they're making on like the chip side, looking particularly at the chips that do inference so that they can make them much smaller and leaner and more effective. I think what some of these models are also, or these companies are also realizing is rather than building these like large language models, developing almost like a mixture of experts, which is what they do in, as you probably know, with Mistral over in France, developing more like specialized smaller models that require less intensive training, but more specific data sets, and also smaller chips on the inference that can run locally and then edge in the cloud if they need to. I think all that innovation is coming out of necessity. Also, like we're seeing more innovation in clean energy, which is great because just regular traditional fossil fuels aren't going to cut it for the energy requirements that we think we're going to need in the future. So I actually feel pretty like hopeful and encouraged around some of the innovation that's happening around the regulation side and the environmental side and and societal side, is that it's almost like the necessity is that we have for these things is creating some really great innovation. So anyway, that's how I think about it.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, speaking of that kind of efficiency, like our last guest was a CEO from a company called Another Brain, and they're redesigning the entire chip and the entire process to have more efficiency, that you don't do all the pollution and you don't need all the power. And so there's a lot of research that's been done with that right now. So I think we certainly invented something that's really amazing. But that led to, now that we've figured out that we can do it, right? There are many other approaches to say, okay, we can do it, but we can do it better, more safer, more economical, more thoughtful. So there's a lot of research going on. So we've interviewed some of those guys on this as well, the really smart folks as well. I do have a question though. We were speaking earlier, there's a new thing that just got dropped by OpenAI. It's called Agent Kit. And I wanted to get your take on that. But before you do that, we were speaking earlier about how does AI make things more efficient, right? And for me, when we say that, I think automation, right? And can we talk a little bit about Agent Kit, about automation, about what have you guys been using for that, and what impact would AI Kit have towards that, and even with the approach that you guys are doing? Let's talk about that for a minute or two.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I think it's interesting because ChatGPT, I think it's a known thing. ChatGPT or OpenAI is trying to reinvent the internet. They're trying to say the internet starts and ends in our chat window, where Google and Microsoft are saying the internet is just fine the way we built it. We're just going to put our models over into all the different areas where people like to exist. And ChatGPT's vision, I think, probably is the most unrealistic, to have to completely redefine the internet. And I keep having good reason to count them out, to say eventually they're going to run out of these ideas. Eventually they're going to stop developing these products. And every week it seems that passes, I am proven to be wrong about them. The fact that they developed this, I think what they saw was like the writing on the wall. People like us help companies use tool like Zapier. There's other ones, Make and N8N and stuff. We use Zapier. I just like the interface. Most people I can teach most people how to use Zapier, and also you can scale up. It's really great to run the automation, but that still requires me to go out to a different tool, have a different subscription, make those connectors, where a lot of people are spending a lot of their time anyway on ChatGPT. So the fact that ChatGPT developed Agent Kit, which is, and I haven't seen where all their connectors are, or if they need like native connectors like Zapier does, or if you can build in webhooks like also Zapier allows, and like custom coding or whatever. I think that will determine its effectiveness, because at the end of the day, 99% of these businesses don't have the technical know-how to deploy anything that requires coding or any sort of sophisticated infrastructure. But I'm willing to bet that this agent kit is going to be intuitive enough that that eventually most people will be able to just start automating workflows in the place that they go to anyway. So I think it's like really dynamic, and I would bet that Zapier and Make and Microsoft Power Automate are all sitting there freaking out if they hadn't already known that this was coming. Because if you think about what AI has done or ChatGPT has done to search, it's going to do the same thing to automation if they get this right. And quite honestly, like we're tool agnostic. Like I don't care. We don't marry ourselves to one tool or model. Whatever's the best, that's what we try to learn. And then what we think is the best, we try to learn that and teach our clients to use that. And it would be nice because we really have most of our clients in ChatGPT just because of how dynamic and it is and how great its products are and how easy it is to use. And we love the API and all of that. So if they figure this part out, if this is at all usable, it's a very exciting game changer.
Can you tell our audience a little bit more about what exactly is Agent Kit?
Okay, yes.
What does it do?
Yeah, it's a good, okay. Agent Kit is essentially a way, so people use the word agent and agentic in AI, I think a lot, and most 90% of it isn't actually agent. It's not actually an agentic agent. And even in this instance, I wouldn't necessarily call it a real agent. It's a defined automated workflow, which is not really what an agent is. An agent can think and make its decisions and veer wherever it think it needs to go to accomplish a task. It'll just design its own task and its own steps that it thinks it needs to take in order to accomplish something. Where what Agent Kit is more like Zapier, which is where it allows you to define individualized steps that need to happen. So what you first do is you determine a trigger event. So when this happens, the rest of the workflow, which is really what it looks like Agent Kit is just an automated workflow. When this trigger event happens, where I upload a file to a folder, I get an email with this subject line, or Mondays at 8 a.m., whatever your trigger event is, you can define next steps that happen after that. And for Agent Kit or even like Zapier, you can bring in outside models and outside tools and outside software. The idea is that like right now, natively, all your applications don't talk to each other. So if I want one application to learn or read and write from another application, I manually have to bring that information from one and put it into the other. Agent Kit will allow that to happen in an automated, seamless process. So let's say like I'm in construction, I get an email to submit a bid. That email has a certain subject line and it hits a certain folder in my Gmail or in my Outlook. That folder is the trigger event that then sets off a series of actions that I have predefined. Some of it might have AI into it, which an AI step which will analyze it. You can run a prompt, you can produce an output. Other steps will be literally like upload a templated document, replace text in a template document and upload it to this folder. Another one could be run an analysis and create an Excel sheet and send it to this person on my team. It could be updating our project management software. It could be going into HubSpot and updating your deal flow or a card or sending a contact or a follow-up. So it allows you to set these series of steps where basically what we would do in Zapier and what we'll look to do here is we'll look at what is something that you do. Like when this happens, when this trigger event happens, you do the next three things that happen are always the same. Now they vary in what the content is or what the analysis is or what the individual output, but those three steps are always the same. In Agent Kit, you can define that, connect those apps, and then have that run in its entirety just by that trigger event happening.
Thank you. I'll give a little summary as well. When you're building by definition, for it to be really agentic, you need to have the AI piece of it, which is the brain. You need to have the connectivity piece of it, which is automation. And then you have the execution piece of it, right? Which is like the CRM or whatever it is, right? And so the AI piece of it is the decision maker, and then it executes something. And we've been using Zapier, Make, a few other platforms for that. And then it executes something on some third-party platform, right? And then it goes back and forth and whatever it is, right? That's been the definition of what we're calling agentic technology for the last couple of years. What AI just did, they literally said, oh, you don't need Zapier, you don't need anything, just literally define everything with OpenAI and execute. That's basically what you're doing. When people are surprised, I was in a chat earlier this morning. I'm involved in a bunch of chat groups on LinkedIn. And in this one, somebody was blown away. Oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, dude, why are you surprised? Historically, this is what happens. And I had to redefine for that group what ChatGPT is, right? ChatGPT is not a chatbot. ChatGPT is an operating system. Okay, that's what it is. It's an operating system platform. If you go way back when I started in the 80s, right, we had something called DOS, and then Microsoft came up with a brilliant idea to create something called Windows, right? And then what did they do? They ate everything that existed. There used to be a software called WordStar and one called WordPress, and they just rewrote it and called it Word, right? There used to be a spreadsheet called Lotus 123, and they just rewrote it and called it Excel, right? There used to be a database. They're all of the core technologies that's needed by consumers and by businesses to operate. Microsoft literally rewrote all of that and killed everyone. And that's why they're the thing, right? We saw this again in like the 90s, right? Or early 2000s when browsers started to become the thing, right? And I have to remind people, find me one application that exists today that doesn't require a browser. Doesn't really exist because TCP IP came in. And so the browser became basically like the new operating system from a user experience point of view, right? This is exactly what OpenAI is doing right now, right? They're building an operating system platform on top of regular operating system, an operating system type of platform that everything will run through it, right? And where they started out, and this is what's brilliant about it, because they're doing it in front of people, and people aren't saying it, right? And so when I say if I do a presentation, I say, you have to think about if you're building something now, would OpenAI have an interest in building that same thing? If that's the case, don't build it.
Right.
Because it's just a matter of time that they're going to put you out of business, right? Because they don't really care. They want to suck in the entire market for all the standard platform technologies that exist today, and they will achieve it. They have billions of dollars to achieve this, right? So when they came out with GPTs, right, everyone that was building these chatbots realized that they're out of business. Same thing with agentic AI, right? If you're building these kinds of automation kind of technology, it's just a matter of time. And I think you need to think about, right, where else do they want to go over the next couple of years and be really careful. The things that you should be building are things that they have no interest in building. Like they're very vertical, they answer very specific problems, right? They're not generic for businesses, they're not generic for individuals, right? Those are the things that you're safe in building, right? And like the stuff that we've just built, which is a technology, AI-driven agentic technology that really helps kids with speech communication and autism. They don't care about that kind of shit, right? Pardon my language. They really don't care. So you can build something like that, take it global, and you don't have to look behind your back, right? But for these generic kind of things that people are building to help other people and that kind of thing, it's inevitable. They will build it. And why should they not? Because it's not building something and now you have control of a vertical market. They would have built something that did not control the general market and solve that general problem. And the things that are running on Microsoft and Google, they've already basically killed Google in many of the things. And they will do the same thing from a Microsoft point of view as well. They have billions of dollars to do that, and I think they'll be very successful.
Yeah.
So that's
I think you're right. And no, I think you're right. And obviously you have that insight that I don't really have, that you've realized that earlier than me. I just kept thinking
well,
that
I'm an
like,
old guy. I've been doing this since the 80s.
yeah,
So,
no, and that's why it's great
seen
to
it
talk
happen
to you.
before.
Yeah, it's why it's great to talk to you and hear from you. The way I think about it, people don't want to change. And if you have to make them change
Yeah.
their behaviors, that's an uphill battle. But I think you're right, obviously. And I think what they're doing, the products that they're producing are so compelling that people are willing to go into a different place to
Yeah.
conduct the things they used to do. And it's unbelievable. And I keep becoming wrong. Almost every week. It's really cool. But I haven't played around I haven't built any of those agents yet, but they already have MCP, model context protocols built into it. And the thing is, what's crazy about that is for so long, people were like, I just want to layer an LLM over my own data. I just want to be able to ask. And then you had Copilot, and it doesn't really work. But now I have Gemini, we run Google Workspace. I want to ask simple questions like, when do I have a 2-hour opening for a deep dive call in the week of October, whatever? I go into Gemini, it can't figure that out. I go into ChatGPT, which is connected to my calendar, and it figures it out. If I'm like,
Yeah.
what are the last 2 proposals that I sent to a construction company for an implementation. In Gemini, it can't figure it out. In ChatGPT,
Yeah,
it can figure it out.
yeah,
It's in people's backyards doing their work better than they can. It is,
yeah.
I don't know how they're doing it. Obviously, it's clearer to you. It's just amazing.
They're quite impressive, and they have billions of dollars. Man, when you have billions of dollars and some of the smartest people, in your company, then you're pretty good to go. No, when you're first of all, they're brilliant. We have to give credit to them, and they have a really great team. So you got to give credit to them. And I think what they haven't said publicly is the long-term strategy. And what we're speaking about is the inevitable long-term strategy, which is really how can they're really taking over Microsoft's role in the world right now. And I'm sure Microsoft wants to figure that out because Microsoft really runs the operating system and all the business application and all that. I think I had a meeting and I was interviewed like 2 years ago. And I said this, right? And I said to the guy I was interviewing, I said, at some point in the future, we're going to talk about before AI and after AI, right?
Yeah.
And it's, what do you mean? This is people who are just starting to talk about ChatGPT 2 years ago. And I said, because my thing is really emerging technologies, right? And I can see how all of this stuff come together and where it's going to go in 5 years. And the reality is that why would you not use it? Initially, you may have the hesitations that we're speaking about, right? But it is once you get what you can do, it is such a sexy, attractive thing that you can sit there. I can ask you how large your business is, and you may say 5 or 10 or 20. And I would say to do the same work that you're doing now would have taken 3 or 4 times the amount of people 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That's really what you're selling to customers. Your customers is that why are you not the most efficient and the most competitive you can be? And what better way can you be the most effective and competitive than with AI? That's the sales pitch. That's the entire sales pitch.
100%. I've been around long enough, but I was trying to convince companies to be on social media. And they're like, oh, I don't think we need to
Mhm.
do that. And what if people say something
Yeah,
bad about us? And I was been around when convincing people they need to have a website. We have a physical storefront. What do you need a website for? All this stuff.
yeah,
And now, like, that's my role here is I feel like it's like just to figure out how do I pull the curtain down so they can see. Once they see this future, like you're talking about pre-AI and post, once they see the future,
mhm,
there is no going back. They like once they
yeah,
really get it,
yeah,
there's no going back. And some of them are excited about that, and some of them aren't, but they at least get it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree.
I would say right now, the big thing is we talk a lot about organizations and we have adult centric themes around what we're doing with AI, et cetera, et cetera. But the big thing is what are we doing to integrate this into the young minds, into the next generations? Because that's really what, is going to define our world over the next decade or a couple of decades. You think about what everything that we use in the world today, a lot of the people that are building products today were just kids 15 or 20 years ago. And when we're talking about AI, I think it's very important that we're building the young minds and educating them about how to use AI and how to be safe around it, but also how to not give up your own identity in the process and lose yourself in the process. I think we tend to be almost very dependent on AI, which actually makes us somewhat despondent, I think, as humans to each other. So I think that's important. What are your thoughts on that, Zach? How can, us as leaders make sure that we're doing that? I think a great example is the young 14-year-old that unfortunately took his life because he fell in love with an AI chatbot and they wanted to be together. And I think that is a case in point that we're not building the whole mantra, so to speak, of what AI is for. It's not a toy, it's an aid to make us more capable as humans, to give us insights to things that we could have never before thought of, to help us expound on ourselves. So, what are your thoughts with some of that, Zach? And how can us as leaders try to do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And unfortunately, regarding the 14-year-old or anything that has like real societal and implications on mental levels, I really don't have good insights for that. But I do think a lot about what is the role of the human in the workforce in the next few years, and how are we preparing young people for that. And I think what we're already seeing is encouraging in some level. So we're already seeing some of the universities that are focusing on skills like communication, creative and critical problem solving, leadership, human to human interaction, which are all going to be critical. When AI can write your code and when run your analyses and things like that, being able to look at that information and use it to creatively problem solve for your business or for your life or whatever, I think that's going to be the unique thing. I always think about, and I have it on my computer, I pull it up when something like this comes, isn't AI going to make us dumber? And probably it will in some ways. And I always pull up a picture of teachers in the 70s protesting the use of calculators in school because they felt that it was going to make students dumber in math. And guess what? They were right. We're all dumber in math, at least as a society. But we're not going to go back. I don't think my accountant, when he does my taxes, I'm not like, what calculator did you use? I still think it's him doing it. It's just like the calculator or whatever tools he's using empowers his knowledge to be able to be applied more effectively. And I think what's going to end up happening is we're going to look at things, as much as I love writing and like the written word, which I really do. I think about words, I think about language, traveled around the world. I lived in China and South Africa and all over the US and things like that. And I got to learn Chinese, at least conversationally. And it's just beautiful. And there's nothing better than connecting with people in language. But I also do think that this idea about AI is writing essays. Is that really like is the physical action of typing words really the most important part of what an essay is, or trying to communicate a point, or thinking creatively and critically about an issue or about a perspective or a topic that you want to be commenting on? I think probably in a few years we're going to find that it's not. We're going to look at it like the calculator. Do I need to do long division on a pen and paper, or can I just think about why it's important to put certain numbers in and get an output and apply that in the real world? So I actually am hopeful in some ways. I find the more that I use AI, I do become reliant on it for certain things. So I honestly, I try to like throttle it back in some areas so I can continue to use the muscle that is my brain. But overall, I find that I'm like, as a business, we're accomplishing way more. And I'm spending way more time with my family. I'm spending way more time in nature, putting my feet in my lawn in my backyard because I'm not killing myself doing the things that the administrative stuff that is required of my business. And I always find that as a society, like human beings, we've done a pretty decent job of finding the balance. So when I love Spotify, like they can charge whatever they want and I will pay that. The fact that I can think of a song with my son and I could just play it is still such a novel, amazing thing to me. But I also have a record player and I have Miles Davis Kind of Blue, which goes every Sunday because I think we look for the balance of the digital to the real world. And so I'm hopeful that as humans, we'll figure out, first of all, what is it that's unique about us? Second of all, what is our role in all of this? And we'll find that balance. I don't know. I don't have any like recipe for the exact thing that we can worry about, but I know that the premium on human to human interaction and ability to communicate and problem solve collaboratively with people is going to be, I think, a premium. It's going to go up.
Agreed with that. And on that, I think we can do a wrap. I think that's a really great way to finish. That I think we can all agree that there's such a huge value, I believe, in efficiency with AI, but at the end of the day, I think really nothing beats a human interaction. And I think we should all continue to value that, as I'm sure that we will. Paul, any final words?
Yeah, it's been a great conversation, and I think we're out of time, but it's been a pleasure, conversing with you, Zach, and I'm sure that our audience has picked up on a lot of value. I know I certainly did from our conversation here. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast here and tapping into some critical topics. Before I end everything here, I just like to ask Zach, if users want to be able to get a hold of you or reach out to you, maybe they're doing their own AI implementation for their organization, how would they be able to best find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me on. I learned a lot too, and I really appreciate and value the work that you all do. And I'm pleased that you allowed me to be able to converse with you, given everything that you've done. So I enjoyed it and I appreciate the questions. So if people want to get in touch, our business website is whoisgcm.com. And my speaker website is zachgiglio.ai. You can reach out there. On LinkedIn, I try to be active and all that. At least my AI bots try to help me stay active on LinkedIn. So you can reach out there as well.
Okay,
Fantastic.
awesome. Cool. All right, guys, thank you. Appreciate it.